It's going to be moderated by Dr. Brett Wells, again, the Director of People Analytics from Perceptyx, who just did that great keynote for us at 2:30. And rather than me taking away time from all the great content we're going to get from this panel, I think I'm just going to go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Wells, and he and the panelists can kind of take it over from there with self-introduction. So having said that, Brett, go ahead and take it away. Floor is yours for all you guys.
Wonderful. Appreciate being back after a short amount of time here. So I'm humbled and honored to be with this great all-star panel of experts. And today we're going to touch on a variety of topics around creating an organizational culture that supports and improves the employee experience. I have the pleasure of leading people analytics at Perceptyx, where we help many Fortune 100, Fortune 500 companies with their listening and analytics strategy. But I would love for each of the panelists to give a brief introduction of themselves, as the spotlight truly is on them today and their great stories. So I'm looking forward to our conversation. Laura, would you mind kicking us off?
Sure. My name is Laura Lee. I'm the Chief Human Resources Officer for MGM Resorts. When we are thriving, our employee population is approximately 68,000 employees, $12 billion industry, and I've been in the hospitality world for 30 years.
Thanks, Laura. It's a pleasure having you. And then Allison, would you mind introducing yourself? Oh, we can't hear you, Allison. I don't know if others are.
Yeah, there's always a button to push somewhere that's blocked the remote mute. So Allison Pinkham, I'm head of HR for Heineken USA. So we are about 85,000 employees globally, worldwide. We have many brands in our portfolio: Red Stripe, Dos Equis, obviously Heineken. So drink them all, you know. I basically come from a little bit of a diverse background from consulting, academia, worked at MasterCard, so financial services, and most recently at a global pharmaceutical company, Boehringer Ingelheim. So a little bit of a mixed experience, but amazing how many parallels go through all those industries with similar challenges we're facing. So really excited to be here.
Yeah, thank you, Allison. And then Alan, would you mind introducing yourself, please?
Hi, Alan Nevel, Senior Vice President, Chief Diversity and Human Resources Officer for the MetroHealth system. We are a public healthcare entity in Northeast Ohio, in Greater Cleveland, and it is a privilege and a pleasure to be here. I've got the unique opportunity to have human resources actually report into inclusion, diversity, and equity, and I oversee both. So excited about this opportunity to speak with you today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Alan. It's great having you here. And then last, but certainly not least, Maria, would you mind introducing yourself, please? Oh, and we can't hear you either, Maria, sorry.
You cannot hear me?
No, there we go.
Can you hear me now? Good. Let me start again. So I'm Alejandra de Cordova. I am the Vice President for Grooming Business in P&G. So the grooming business is comprised by important brands like Gillette, Ron, the Art of Shaving, Venus. We have just launched recently Kind in the United States. We have Joy, and I am really happy to be here and really engage on the conversation because, as Laura and Allison said, we are facing several similar challenges. So it's nice to learn from all of you. So nice to be here.
Awesome. Well, you can see we have a great panel prepared for everyone to give some insights. So let's just dive in with the first question here. And undoubtedly the curveballs that were thrown at us during this last year put a spotlight, I think, on organizational culture, the employee experience, thinking of the pandemic. Talking to Alan, I think there's actually 2 pandemics. I love his thoughts on that. What did you learn about culture over the past year, both its shining characteristics and maybe even perhaps some cracks in the foundation? So Alan, why don't you kick us off and then we'll go around with everybody else. Oh, and Alan, I think, are you on mute? Sorry.
Sorry about that. So we are all going to get the mute button thing together. So I appreciate your flexibility around that. But yes, I do believe we are in the midst of two pandemics. The pandemic known as COVID, and that's one stressor that everyone, be it our patients, our employees, and our community, we're all facing. The second pandemic is a 400-year pandemic of systemic racism and social injustice. And when you think about where we were last year around this time, COVID was approaching the US. And I think we underestimated the impact that it would have on us both mentally and physically, and emotionally and spiritually as well. So one of the things that we quickly learned was in the midst of chaos, in the midst of confusion, all of the hate that was spewed over the course of 2020, and then the murder of George Floyd, we realized within our organization, our culture has continued to steadily progress. But we were at an inflection point where we saw an opportunity to really change the trajectory of our organization. And we intensified an already strong focus on creating a culture where every single member of our MetroHealth system family is able to bring their whole selves to work, feels a sense of inclusion and belonging, regardless of whether they're located here at our main campus or at one of our regional hospitals or any of our ambulatory sites across this system. There should be a continuous feeling of being in the family. And I liken it to all of us have relatives who are scattered all over. And at the end of the day, even though we haven't been able to hug them, given that it's COVID, we've had to operate in a venue like this, in a virtual sense, that love is still there. That compassion, that empathy is still there. So we've had to make really concerted efforts to ensure that everybody still feels connected. So we've done a lot of things. I think my biggest learning was there's a silver lining to any type of tragedy or any type of bad event that occurs. I think what happened last year opened everyone's eyes. I think the world had to slow down because of COVID, pause and reflect. So if you think about the deaths of George Floyd, of Ahmaud Arbery, of Breonna Taylor, for many people, that was just the news of the day generally. You hear about it, you're appalled, but you move on. 2020 was a year where you had to pause and say, oh my gosh, there is something inherently wrong with this system, with the fact that there are inequalities and inequities that permeate our laws, even the way we take care of one another from a healthcare perspective. It caused all of us to have to pause and reflect and realize that we all have ownership in this. It's not a Black issue. It's not a white issue. It's not a Latinx issue. It's a human issue. And we all have an opportunity to recapture our humanity.
Yeah, many thanks for sharing that. And certainly healthcare has been disrupted, your industry. Another industry that I think top of mind that's been disrupted is hospitality, especially if you've checked in recently at a MGM property. And I was curious from your perspective, Laura, what's been kind of your lessons and what you've learned about the culture over the last year and the challenges?
Sure. And Henry and Bobby are going to make sure my microphone's a little better and let me know. So hopefully you can hear me. I think the biggest lesson we learned when you're laying off 94% of your staff within a matter of a week to 2 weeks is that we led from our heart and our head, that we truly are a caring organization. We made a lot of effort to really engage our employees throughout our closures and, calling them. Our leaders were calling and checking on them, seeing what they needed. We have an employee philanthropic fund that while people did receive pay while being off, that we also provided financial opportunities for them if they needed support paying other bills while being in this furloughed status. So I think, that was the biggest thing. We knew it, but we really exhibited it during the closures.
Wonderful. And then let's move on to our next question here. So I'm curious, how did you keep employees engaged during the pandemic? And thinking of the pandemic, racial injustice, economic uncertainty. Allison, can you talk to in terms of what Heineken's learned and how you're keeping employees engaged right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So it really was about the human connection, and both Alan and Laura had mentioned this. When you think about the pandemic, as well as what was happening in society that people were experiencing, the employer quickly took on the role of being more than an employer. And employees took on the role of saying we are human beings first and foremost, beyond just employees. So one of the things that we did was to engage employees through all of the different multiple crises that happened last year, was really to make sure they knew we cared about them as human beings. And what did that mean? That meant, starting first with the pandemic, that we were not going to put profit above safety. So we put in place a number of things around a decision framework, when to send our field force out. And we didn't rely on government officials because, as everyone knows, there's a lot of politics that were going into those decisions. So rather than that, we actually looked at our own transmission rates and how COVID was spreading and where we felt comfortable, and when we felt comfortable sending them out. And then we also, as we talk a lot about employee voice, asked their opinion. How do they feel? Are they comfortable going out? And there were a few cases they were comfortable going out, and we actually said, no, it's not safe yet. And we're going to hold you back. And they actually really appreciated that. So that on top of, and then going through the other crises, as Alan had mentioned, was also, okay, now how do we step up as human beings for each other and care for each other? How do we have the tough dialogues on what's going on? How can we as an employer do better? How do we be transparent in where we are and where we can grow? And how can we all actively contribute to that? So to me, one of the biggest learnings, if you will, and Heineken's a very relationship-driven culture anyway. So that was one of the, kind of tying it back into the first question, the shining spot that came out for Heineken, to the point of, again, showing that care for our employees, for their safety, but as well as treating them all as, and it sounds silly to say, but human beings first, employees second. And that actually translated in our highest our highest climate scores in history, actually, at our company, despite having to do layoffs, despite having all the things that were going on, no bonus payout, reduction in merits, everything that comes along with that. And it was a shock. It was amazing to see that engagement score stayed that high, because it was really related to the care that the company stepped forward with to really help people feel engaged, and also that they had a voice.
That's wonderful. And in thinking about not only the communication, but that transparency, it's not easy to give that. And I think a lot of organizations stray away from delivering bad news, but doing it in such a way that is putting the human element first, and saying that here are the challenges we're facing. We have to go to layoffs, and then we're not getting the bonuses that were normally structured. It's incredible to see employees continue to lean in. So it's probably a testament to that communication strategy and circling it back with employees. And then Maria, I was curious, you shared some interesting stories when we connected earlier in terms of how you're leveraging employee listening and the strategy to uncover barriers that are getting in the way of people and organizational success. I was hoping that you could touch on some of your insights here.
Yeah, let me just first check if you can listen my voice, because before the mute, yeah, good, okay. So I will say first, I admire what Laura, Allison, and Alan already has shared, because I agree 100% with what you said. And also, Allison, we have done very similar approach. And in our case, we have not only people working from home, we have essential workers around the world. They need to be present in the office, right? And how we can take care of them as well. So, and Alan, I think I will add another pandemic beyond the one you mentioned, the two that you mentioned. I think is the stigma on mental health is another big one that we all need to keep taking care, because for me, it's a strategy now, right? The strategy of wellness. Coming back to your question, Brett, one key element for me that is crucial is the most important piece when we talk about humans is be compassionate and kind. And the only way to be compassionate and kind is open to listen and build a dialogue of understanding, recognizing that you don't know everything, that you need to educate yourself when you don't know, right? When the Russian injustice starts happening, we need to open the door and say, we have blind spots. We need to move from tolerance to appreciation, but the only way to do that is learning and be open to learn what you have learned before. And I will say the important piece of what we have done as a company is open and listen with the heart and be compassionate about what every person needs to have as a support. It's no longer the time where you have one solution for everyone, right? We need to think about the personalization of the flexibility that every person needs, because the needs of a mom sitting in an essential worker that have kids in the house alone because they need an online classes is very different from a mom that have a health at home and she's working from home. So you need to start thinking how the benefit itself goes from equality to equity, because that is the key piece. So for me, the listening part is listen with the heart, be engaged with the needs of the personalization. But also one caveat that I mentioned to you during the pandemic is in the beginning, I can imagine a lot of people happen the same, right? In the beginning, everyone, because the line of that had been moving. Everyone thought that we will go home for 1 month or we're gonna go home for 2 months. And what happened is you were really aware and you start connecting with people and asking them how they feel, how they see, you know, what do you need. But after 6 months, you are tired, you are worn out. You also yourself need to take care of yourself, right? So you don't have the time to start asking all the people that. And people were saying, you were more close to me in the beginning than now. So you need to reinvent yourself and help managers also how to be continuously connected and listening to the needs of the people. And sometimes as well, we delegate the decision on how you avoid burnout to the employee. And to be frank, we are giving too much responsibility to the employee to decide that. The decision is to come from the company, what priority you will put in front of people, what things you will put in the back burner, what things you will be really take it out for help people to cope with the situation they are facing. So I think that is, if you ask me engagement, that is what we have done, is listen with compassion and kindness, understanding the personalization of the needs, and trying to educate ourselves, but also help others to unlearn things that they were unlearning before.
I appreciate those insights, Maria. I'm sure we all kind of relate. I see a lot of head nodding when you speak. I'm curious to the panel, and I think this is more just popcorn, so not going to call on anyone in particular. Just feel free to share your thoughts. But what practical advice, thinking of the experiences you've garnered, not only over the last year, but your entire careers, what you can share in terms of creating an environment where employees feel engaged and supported, especially during difficult times like 2020?
Yeah, I think there are a couple things that we've done within MetroHealth that tie directly back to what Maria said in terms of that empathetic listening. From a patient perspective, we have really engaged our patients in focus groups to understand what are some of their concerns in terms of our ability to address the disparities that exist within health. Why do our Black patients view their perceived quality of care differently from their white and Latinx and Asian counterparts? So really engaging them to help us with developing the solution, rather than going off on our own and, assembling ourselves and assuming what they need. Let's engage them to craft a solution. Same thing from an employee perspective. What we've done is we've created a psychologically and physically safe environment for people to be able to speak up. So again, with the death of George Floyd, we created opportunities for our employees to say what was on their mind. And that it resulted in a series of videos that we created that are accessible both internal to MetroHealth as well as our external facing website, entitled Healing Begins with Listening, because we truly believe that all too often we may hear one another, but are we truly listening? And once we listen, I can never walk in your shoes, Dr. Wells. However, if I listen, I can better understand what you're going through. You can better understand what I'm going through. And that's how we're able to connect at a human level. And then the last piece is listening to our community. We realize, for instance, given the COVID vaccine, it's available, but we see that based on race, based on income level, all the different social determinants of health, the acceptance or adoption of the vaccine varies. So what are we doing? We're engaging community leaders, faith-based leaders who already have connections, deep, strong connections in the community, in order to serve as ambassadors, if you will, cheerleaders, coaches, et cetera, to really help share the facts around vaccinations. Ultimately, it's a personal decision, but I'd much rather you be equipped with the facts rather than all the different things that you can, get on the internet that are not necessarily fact-based. So what we've done is we've practiced that empathetic listening across our employees, our patients, as well as our community.
Yeah, maybe I could jump in as part of the popcorn, if you will. So we did something similar with the I&D initiatives when we start with inclusion and diversity, but it's really about, it was an opportunity. People want to get engaged. Like when this happens in our society, our employees, again, going back to the human connection, they want to do something to improve where we are as a society. So we set up, I know this is common in other organizations, but it was new for Heineken, but employee resource groups that cut across many different areas I just had a number of meetings with them this morning, but we're linking that up with where everyone can get involved. And at the same time, we're also creating the strategy that cuts across not just internal and external, but really looks at 3 pillars. So our communities and the support we have in communities, colleagues, which is the internal, how are we supporting our own colleagues, and then consumers, which is also that link to, and people had mentioned this is link, actually I heard a little bit from the keynote speaker before, it's the link to the business impact as well. So it's really looking at it from a company perspective, but also linking that up to how all employees can get involved with each of those pillars. And in addition to that, create the community and the mentorship and the support within their organization, but also have that ability to really ladder up and make an impact on Heineken internally, but also externally, consumers regarding what everything we do with what agencies we work with, how our advertisements come across. So it goes, and communities is regarding the scholarship. So it's external and internal. And that's been, from an employee engagement perspective, fantastic, because people feel they really have now a space to get involved and to make an impact on not only Heineken, but also society through the efforts we're doing. So there's a lot of passion around that, which is great.
Yeah. And Brett, I'll just add, I think everyone's touched upon this, but transparency is key. Be it a pandemic or, social injustice, such as what happened with George Floyd and others last summer. Your CEO really needs to be the lead in communicating information when you're in a crisis. We had employee network groups before, but we started courageous conversations as a result of the social injustices last summer, that we even have our board members attending so that they can hear from our employees what needs to improve, what communication gaps there are, just regardless, of what the matter may be. So we found a lot of success, and it's also opened our eyes that we need to utilize our employee network groups when we have programs, human resources programs, talent programs, and so forth, to bounce those ideas off of them, because the information just wasn't getting to them like we thought it was.
Ellen, I like your thoughts earlier on these crises have a silver lining. And perhaps one of the silver linings is how organizations have become far more agile, resilient, have accelerated change over the past year. I'm curious, from all of your perspectives, the extent to which that's been true, and how do you intend to maintain those new habits going forward where they happen all the time, not just during a pandemic?
I think one of the things, within our organization, we and my colleagues said the same thing. we went from having a number of folks who were essentially butts in seats at a physical location to then having to have them work from home. And that was a huge paradigm shift because you're no longer with your work family and you spend more time at work than you do with your friends, family, and loved ones typically. So how do we keep you engaged? How do we create that sense of belonging? But how do we also give you the equipment, the tools, the resources in order to effectively do your job? And then you add on top of that, now many of our employees are also playing teacher during the day with their children who are at home. So really trying to handle all of those complexities and again, listening and providing them with partnerships, with opportunities, even outside of MetroHealth. You know, our EAP, our Employee Assistance Program, folks who report under me, they were very active last year. And to Maria's earlier point, the mental anguish of all of this is something that we cannot take a back seat to and ignore.
Yeah, I will. I don't know if you can. I cannot see the yellow triangle there, so I don't know if you are listening to me because every time
we can hear you.
talk,
we can hear you perfect.
Yeah. Great. So I will say I agree with you, Alan. It's an important point, but I will say agility came, I think, in everywhere, even with things that we always have in front of us and we never use it as we should be. So soon, Teams, WebEx, all these things exist for years. But we were just so tied to working in a space with the normal dynamics, and the routines in our work have changed and definitely have changed so much that we need to learn how to deal now with the new, I will not say it's a new normal, it's the way we need to work. And it's accelerating learnings, and it's understanding that whoever was not digital now is digital. Whoever was thinking that they cannot work from home, they are working from home. And you are discovering also people that said, wow, I discovered now that I can use my commute to do anything else. Like I do my, my yoga classes or my meditation or my time with my kids. As you said, Alan, a lot of parents like myself, right? We are with the kids at home doing homework and they are asking questions. So what we are trying to also see is what other things we need to bring to support employees. So we are thinking about tutoring. We are thinking about how to help moms that are really dealing with the normal chores of the house when the kids are there, but also doing work. How we can create core hours for people to work, how we will bring more flexibility on the way people can really develop themselves and not jeopardize the opportunity to have, to grow and do their work. So, and I think the agility mindset is something that this pandemic is silver lining, but I think brought as a consequence of something that we need to do different. And I think the other piece I feel the employees have learned during the pandemic and during this last year is how to take control of your life. And even though I understand that the mental health for me is one of the biggest issues that we will face, we need to bring mental health as a first aid. And I am even thinking in the company we are thinking is how we train people to identify those signs and help people to navigate, because that is the way to demystify the way we work with people that have mental health. We all have one moment on that in our life. So once again, I think agility is here to stay. We need to adjust. Meetings need to change dynamics. In fact, something that I am suggesting a lot is don't come back and do meetings when you are back with BCS or, video conference, because it's not you will be putting people in a pressure that they need to be physically in a space. You need to leverage what you are learning here and eliminate things that could be that were fancy, but not worth it. At this moment, we need to think about what elements or changes you need to do in your office, even if that office needs to be more a collaboration space than really a work space. So that is our things that I think everyone needs to think about for engagement.
I think also the organizations, if anything, they should have learned that you have to do a better job considering the employee's total well-being when making your people decisions, right? It's, a new way of working. And it's amazing how agile you can be. I'll share this one story. We had a 12 to 18 month plan to roll out mobile check-in and digital keys the beginning of last year. Guess what? We did it in 2 months. So I think sometimes we get caught up organizationally in this kind of analysis paralysis paradigm, especially when you're a big company. So I think a lot of we need to spend time assessing our culture, looking at the health of our culture, and perhaps you may be changing your values and how you work to be a better organization moving forward.
Well, I'm curious, we kind of lightly touched on this, and while the rip the Band-Aid off, jump to remote work was undoubtedly stressful for all of us, or most of us involved, returning to the office will bring its own set of anxieties and worries. I'm curious, from all of your perspectives, what's one thing you're doing to help employees who are either transitioning back or already transitioned back into in-person work feel supported and safe? And what are those lessons learned that you can share with everyone? Because that's right in front of the windshield, so to speak.
Yeah, I can start. So we kept making the decision of when we're reopening the office. Our office is still closed. We do, as I mentioned, have this decision framework where our field force is in a few states now where the transmission rate is at a reasonable level. But as far as the actual office, we've had that closed. Actually, it's coming up, I think it was a year this week. And we made the decision to reopen in September. And the reason we did that was, and a few people had mentioned, the pandemic has had effect on people, especially caregivers who are trying to caregive at the same time as work. And the thought was, if we open in the summer, that's going to put extra pressure on those caregivers when there's no camp or there's no school. So we did make the conscious decision to open in September, to the point I think, Maria, you had made too, which is we don't want people to feel pressured to come in because their colleagues are there. So that was one piece, that we're technically reopening the office in September. We're also going to a hybrid model. So that was something that got accelerated. I said we're a big relationship driven company, but that's now something we realized that we're able to do. So it'll be a hybrid model when we're actually using that work environment. But even though we're not opening till September, what we are doing is really sharing information, FAQs around the vaccine deployment, and what are our views on that, what's coming from that is actual facts. Alan, you mentioned this, there's a lot of information out there, really culminating down as what is actual facts. We're leveraging our employee assistance program, but also different things that we work with Cigna for one of our benefits, but also what does Cigna have in place. So we're really giving information, equipping our employees with information, even though we're technically not opening until September. So employees feel comfortable with what's happening. And we're sharing with them that we're not making it mandatory. We are recommending the vaccine, asking them to talk with their doctor, but we're very clear on our stance on that at this point. And I think that information helps people in this stage of ambiguity and not knowing where to turn, in addition to not feeling pressured to open the office too soon for them.
Yeah, I think it's been interesting because there's the desire to bring folks back, but we've also learned, because of the flexibility, the adaptability, the resilience of our folks, some folks are actually more efficient working from home. Mm-hmm. So to Allison's point, I view us as having three different groups of employees: those who are in person, and because we're in healthcare, obviously our providers need to be in person, but there's been a rise in telehealth visits. Probably all of us over this period of time have spoken to our provider using a cell phone or what have you. So that's something that's new. But also there are the in-person, there's the hybrid model, and then there's some people who probably are going to be 100% remote based on their job. If you think about organizations where you've got recruiters, do your recruiters have to be on site all the time? You know, that may be a blended model. And I think the other thing is, now we've got opportunities to really access talent outside of our normal geography. I'm located in Northeast Ohio. For IT talent, I can probably source outside of Northeast Ohio, because all you need to do is have that connection now. So it's really changed the way we think about job descriptions, roles, all of those things.
Thanks for sharing that. It sounds like the entire old handbook is thrown out and we're writing it new in 2021. And, you know, with that mindset and thinking a little bit future out and to end our last handful of minutes together, I'd love to hear from each of you. What do you hope to accomplish in 2021 with employee listening, and how do you hope it moves the needle in terms of the business? So I'd love to hear all of your perspectives on how you're using it. What do you hope to accomplish this year?
In my view, in my case, will be more, this is not a moment, this is a movement. We really need to learn from what we had faced during the last year and change the way we operate as a total business, as a total globe, as a total humanity. More and more we need to listen, as I said before, right? Like I think personalization will be one key element. How you really go to a place where people feel that they can fulfill what they need, working no matter where or no matter how. I feel that we need to move from where you work. This is the how. You need to think about the what and the why and create purpose. The more purpose people feel, the better they will engage in your organization. So you need to give that purpose. And for me, the place where they work and how they work will be secondary.
I can jump. Go ahead. Go ahead, Laura. Please, go ahead.
And I think I'll just add piggybacking, and I'm sure we'll all have similar things to say, but again, how do you continue to foster that growth mindset that we've been able to create and really drive, right? We've talked about it, may have trained about it, keep that going. How do we continue to listen to our employees, because they've said it's the human experience. It's not just me at work, it's that total well-being, and continue to drive that within our organization to engage and create a better employee experience overall. That's what, you know, I hope to gain over this next year or years as we do this work and continue to hopefully thrive in the hospitality business.
Yeah, and just to add, I think that the listening is so important, especially as we learned what we learned in 2020 and what's resonating with employees and helping them feel engaged and continue to be part of the solution, and actively really working together to make whatever enhancements we want to make to Heineken, but also in society as a whole. So it's really about so far, the areas we've been doing to continue to take into account employees' views on their safety, the dialogues around I&D, continuing to learn. It's really about being a learning organization, to be honest. It's really about how do we keep our ears open and continue to learn through all of these different areas. And I think what it's done is also enhance that learning capability in anything we're rolling out. I mean, normally you pressure test and so forth, but it's really about, let's really understand what the employees are going through and how can we be the best employer for them in the areas that they want to be engaged with. So it's more continuing with this learning and listening technique, but obviously through that, we'll probably learn new ways to listen to our employees, but the point is to keep that top of mind in everything we're doing.
Yeah, and I would say ditto, D, all of the above. The only piece that I would add is for us as senior leaders in our organizations, we have to be comfortable allowing ourselves to be vulnerable and to say that we don't have the answers. And that requires a level of humility that typically as leaders, we think we're supposed to have all the answers. And to understand and allow ourselves to be vulnerable, again, creates that safe space for our employees to give us that tough feedback on how we can make each one of our workplaces better.
Well, thank you so much. We're just coming up on our time. Again, to the panelists, thank you for sharing your time and expertise with all of us. I certainly learned a great deal during our time together, and I'm going to steal that this is a movement, not a moment, and you are all clearly creating movements within your organizations, leveraging the employee experience to make the world of work far better for your employees and customers, patients, and the list goes on. So thank you so much for your time. And I'll turn it over back to our super moderators if they have anything to add.
And no, I don't think there were any questions for the panelists at all. It was just more comments and related to common themes that we had throughout the day. And I like Alan, you kind of summed it up best there. That was that was a common topic or talking point for a lot of the sessions today about the vulnerability and humility for the leaders. I mean, when you've expressed that to the workforce, and we heard about people taking action on that. I think you were talking about that, Dr. Wells, earlier. Rather than just making it appear as if you're vulnerable or appearing humble, when you take action on the feedback and do things about it, I think is what really makes the difference for the leaders and the employees overall. So again, thanks everybody. I want to echo what Dr. Wells said there about, thanking everybody for coming to the event. Loved all of the feedback. And if we have any additional questions in addition to the comments later on, we'll get them over to you and make it available on the chat here, because the platform is again going to be open until next Friday at 11:45. So love the insights in the changes in employee listening strategies and actually leveraging those to uncover the barriers that are kind of getting in the way of the people in organizational success. So on behalf of the audience and everybody here at Opal Group, again, thank you so much for joining us today, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.